So we're gonna do now, guys, the funeral singer. We're gonna do an excerpt.
Okay.
So I'm honored. Thank you. So the funeral singer. So it comes in. I could wait. Yeah. I think they might be heading out.
Okay. Oh yeah.
I don't know. I'll tell them. It was so nice meeting you guys. If you're heading out.
No.
Oh, you're not. Okay.
No, our daughters just want to know where to meet us.
Oh yeah, sure.
So we have another.
She wants me to read the funeral
Good.
singer.
I'm listening.
Okay, sounds good. So I'll explain. So the funeral singer, and thank you so much for being here and wanting to hear my reading.
I'm really enjoying it.
I'm so
Not
glad.
hike my stars enough.
Oh, well, the same. Pisces. I was going to say Greek at Pisces, which means same for me. So the funeral singer is very special for a lot of reasons. I did it as an artist book, which is a fancy way of saying, for those that don't know artist books, there was a lot of thought put into the paper I selected, getting it foil stamping, doing a limited edition. It's also based on another novel that I have that I wrote, and it takes us, and I'm very honored to be reading this here in Greece, in Athens, following the life of a refugee from Smyrna in the Great Catastrophe, where the Great Catastrophe, where the city was burned, and a lot of Greece is very big, got a lot of its new population of the Greek Anatolians that came to Athens, and then also skipping to 1944, Nazi-occupied Greece. So very much is a story about refugee life, but also the personal narratives that play out with historical narratives and desire. So the funeral singer, which is available in artist book form, that comes in a beautiful silk sleeve that Mesra Cyrus sews, but also to make it more accessible to others in a chapter form as well. With that being said, I'm going to take you in the middle of the story, and just to give you background, I think that probably helps. The refugee Vasily has retreated from Athens to a mountainous village during 1944 Nazi-occupied Greece, and a band of female female resistance fighters, because during the war there were resistance fighters to Nazi's occupation, but there was also female resistance fighters that were fighting not just to, and Areti can correct me in any Greek history I get wrong, but the Antarctises were fighting not just against Nazis, but also for a gender revolution for a new type of Greece. And having all right, with all of that, the funeral singer. When Zoe stood in the light of the fire behind the old cafe, Vasily saw she was wearing a khaki uniform jacket without any chevrons, an artillery belt around her waist, and the most memorable of things, pants. Never in his years had Vasily recalled seeing the legs of a woman outlined in such a way outside the home, in a fabric chart that charted the stride of her ankles to the sway of her hips. What was more misplaced was the rifle slung across her back. Vasily remembered his years as a conscript away from his sister, the countless liberated sighs of pleasure whispered into his ear that replaced his sister's cries. 4 years he'd been spared the medley of male sweat and her scent that she'd drag into the room when she strolled back home every dawn. Without her by his side, he had allowed himself to taste a bit of life. The act of love produced no guilt. It was not a laborious burden to which he felt indebted. He became a man with Thalia, a daughter of a shepherd from Attica. He experimented some with Katarina, a very young widow who lived near the Clitoria cave lakes, and so on, until Vasily began to recognize a pattern of endings that brought his sorrow back. Once the act was over, they had to straighten their hair, button their shirts, and erase any mark that the act had occurred. Those women were trespassing into a freedom that was stolen. Zoe, too, flaunted a freedom of her gender that was grounded only in the promise of a revolution. You remind me, he told Zoe, of my sister. Tell me of her then. She pulled out a match and lit another cigarette. He didn't ask himself why she had asked this, only how he should start with their home on Alithea Street in Athens, when his days of being a soldier had ended and he worked as a blacksmith. The morning his sister came home wearing a thin string of pearls. Mother used to wear a necklace like this, Vasily recalled her saying. He had pressed a ball of bread against his string beans, sliding it around his plate to mop up the tomato-soaked oil. His eyes he kept on his plate. Outside, Red Cross radio played with a grainy but serious voice that had been speaking since 1922, yet never seemed tired. Next party seeking information concerns Artemis Paliologu, born 1900 in the village of... Vasily had gotten up from the table and closed the window. The radio could still be heard, but the endless names of the vanished Greeks of Anatolia that it called out became indecipherable. He returned to his plate of beans. Unbothered, his sister continued, giving out a long, breathy laugh. Mother got the pearls as a gift from a man who loved her and whom she loved back. She puffed a bit on her cigarette, shook her head, and flicked some ashes into an ashtray that wasn't there. You, Achmana, you wore them with joy. She pulled the necklace away from her neck, let it fall against her collarbone, then dropped her head into the table, face first. Into the wood she began to sing, and the pretty girls of Smyrna are hidden still in their family tombs. The smoke of the cigarette seeped out from under her face. He had stopped asking many things, why she wouldn't marry, what had been the color of their mother's hair, and of course to stop working. There was no longer a need to sing at the clubs. The outlawed hashish dens where Smyrna's dirge was sung in the music of Rembetiko, and sung in secret. The refugees of Anatolia were reminders that Greece's great idea of irredentism became the great catastrophe. But by the time he had told her this, when he was old enough to bring home money, she was already at the door. Her needs had changed since he was a boy in need of nurturing. She went now to the dens for the music. She went to go back to Smyrna. I won't leave with you, Vasily told Zoe. I won't join the war. The campfire lingered in Zoe's eyes. She was an exit, a stroll through a dream of opiates he was too afraid to take. How could he leave? There was a secret he wanted unearthed, and it could only happen at the exhumation. Where is your sister now? Zoe asked, ignoring his refusal. He paused to think about how he should answer. The refugees of the dens liked Black Mary burning between their lips. They liked the vapors of the nargile to linger a little in their throats before it curled out from the nose. Vasily's sister had been of the camp that preferred the lethargic fog of opium because it numbed the body of its violation by another drawn breath, sustaining a catastrophic life. It was, though, the hourglass shape of the nargile, with its Medusa arms, that his sister smiled at from across the room in the dens, not the gentleman in the pinstripe suit always guarding her, caressing the hookah pipe to the rhythm of the dirge Vasily's sister was singing. One morning, Vasily explained, she never came home. I searched the underground clubs. He had walked up and down Piraeus, ashamed to ask the cafe patrons sitting outside if they knew her, because he knew most of them did. How to find the entrance to a place without a door. He did so by following the bitter smell of familiar smoke, then entering shuttered shops to see if she was there. He had never had to speak a word, for by now this tragedy was familiar to the company inside. On his third try, he found a man immersed in a fog of hashish, his eyes fixed on something across the room. Vasily followed his gaze to a shadow hunched over the table, covered in a cloud. There she was, cradling a hookah full of opium in a pool of blood from wrists thinly slit. When I buried her, Vasily told Zoe, I had the mason chisel the date September 13th, 1922 on her tombstone. Because although that date was 22 years past, this was the date in the hashish den, with the same dirge carried back from Smyrna playing inside its smoky walls. Its song erased the future, made everyday Smyrna, and haunted you until you succumbed to it and died. She must have had some funeral song then, said Zoe. She squinted her eyes as she inhaled the last flame of the cigarette, then tossed its remains to the ground. I didn't allow one. He sounded like Plutarch reciting Solonian law, but Vasily had reason it was music that had convinced her to join the other side, not just opiates, so why continue to knife a corpse? Oh, Zoe shook her head as if she knew the rest. Since the burial at night, he saw her, as if also to make up for all the years of disappearing into the dens. He would see his sister standing among the scattered, jagged rocks that marked the end of Greece, Cape Taneron, still 15 and clutching her archaeology books under an arm. She'd move her lips, singing a song Vasily could never hear, and every time she opened her mouth, he saw a cave of black. Behind her, Poseidon's sea crashed inside the drowning caves of Hades, whose rocky entrance was blocked by a column of a fallen temple. Cape Taneron. She was dead, yet her silent voice was not only present, it was deafening. Come. Smoke seeped out the corners of Zoe's mouth. She extended out her hands. It's not too late. So Areti, I don't know if I did Greek history justice, but I did print this, and one of the most important things.
It's beautiful.
On the 100th anniversary, which was this past year, of the great catastrophe, the burning of Smyrna.
Peter, will you take a picture of all of us here? I want to
Bye, everybody. Sorry, I was saying bye to Instagram.
Okay.
I don't know.